we'll go ahead and get
Just
started, Barb. Thank you.
yeah.
Welcome to the ILBA webinar today. Thank you, Barb, for coordinating this for everyone. My name is Carice. I am the marketing manager here at Sashco for our log home products. And sitting next to me
I'm
is
Jim.
Jim Sustain Guy. That's what we call him. I'll let him give you a little bit more of his background in just a second here. Um, but we got a few things we're going to be covering today. We're going to focus primarily on how stains fail, because let's face it, we want to avoid that. So we're going to spend some time going to how stains fail. We'll spend a little bit of time on Stain Technology 201. We did some of that in the last webinar, so if you haven't seen that, that one was recorded as well. And then we'll also be talking about why paint is a bad idea on a log structure. We'll leave some time at the end for Q&A, and we'll also have our a little QR code for you at the end for you to fill out to get a sample pack from us and a fun call from Todd or Joanne or Jordan to follow up with you and answer any other questions that you might have. So just a little bit of background on me. I've been with Sashco for a little over 20 years now. I started out in customer service where they do an amazing job training us and really fell in love with the log home side of things. And so moved my way over into marketing and have been doing mostly marketing and just customer support and really getting to know the people in the log home world. And I really love it. Just a great group of people to work with. So I've been here, like I said, 20 years now. I kind of head up the writing of the curriculum and setting of our agenda for our contractor training courses. So I get to interact with a lot of pros as well as homeowners who have log home jobs on a regular basis.
All right. And I'm Jim Barnes again. I'm the stain guy. I've been doing this for Sashco for about 15 years. And before that, 15 years prior was spent doing paints and stains and coatings, waterproofers, all kinds of stuff like that. So this is all, it's 30 years of experience going back into all what we're going to tell you today.
Mm-hmm. So without further ado, we'll get started. If you do have questions, there is a chat box that you can type those into in your, and I have the different, I forget where it is. But there's a chat box where you can type in a question, but we'll also let you unmute at the end. But make sure you write your questions down, because if you're anything like me, you'll forget about them unless you write them down. So hopefully we answer them throughout too, but if we don't, type them in and we'll get to them at the end, or we'll unmute you and you can ask them at the end. Okay. Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Staining comes after proper prep, right? So we're going to hope that you've already done, or we're going to assume for these purposes, that you've already done all the prep. You've got sound wood, meaning there's no loose fibers at the surface, that it's clean and textured and dry and warm. A lot of times that means you've gone back in and you've either sanded it all down, you've glass blasted it all down, you've maybe Osborne brushed it or Buffy patted it, whatever else you got to do. Maybe you power washed it and then did some secondary prep after that. But you've got it down into good condition. And if you're going to put on a preservative like a Timbor, borate preservative, then you've already put that on and it's dried out after that. Last step that I like to make sure people do is to do just some quick tests. You can use tape to make sure that there's nothing that will easily peel off of the wall. If you look at the wood and you're looking at it and thinking, well, maybe I've got all of it off, maybe not, use some duct tape or packing tape, press it on there real good and tight and try to yank it off. If it does yank off, you probably got a little bit more prep to do, because your stains will only stick to that outer layer for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And if it just peels off real easy, then the stain's not going to stick very well. Last step there that is listed is the water splash test. We like to see a little bit of water just splashed on the wood. That gives us a lot of information about the wood and if it's prepped well enough. If water soaks in really easy, then any stain will just soak right in very easily as well. But if it beads up at the surface, then you have some idea that there might be a non-drying oil in there or something, which could interfere with any water-based material that's trying to stick to that wood. In addition, you can also see if there was gray wood on that log previously, and the water gets splashed on there and it still looks black, then you still have gray wood there. And that's going to show through when you stain it. So a couple different things. And that splash test could be as easily as just going up with a cup of water and literally splashing water onto the surface. You could lightly mist it with a hose, whatever else you want to do that way. And then, of course, you got to let that dry out a little bit.
And I would particularly mention that this also applies to new construction.
Mm.
We have a lot of people think they can get away with just a very quick wash down with a, light cleaner or something like that and call it good on new construction. That's not enough. There's enough unsound, UV damaged, dirty wood fibers that have built up on the surface that need to have some sort of mechanical abrasion done to remove
Yep.
them. So don't rest on the laurels of it being new.
That is actually a common mistake with new construction is that it takes months for these log homes to actually be cut and assembled in a log yard, disassembled, brought to the site, reassembled. And they're usually very yellowed by the time they actually get put up. And that yellowing is sunburn on the logs, and that should be removed before you stain. If not, the stain fails earlier.
So this next slide, I'm actually going to skip over. We'll come back to it towards the end when we talk more stain technology. Here's an example of the water splash test.
Yep, on the right-hand side, you see that water just soaks right into the wood really easy. On the left side, it's beating up.
I got a laser pointer,
Pretty
people.
easy.
I'm super fancy here. I don't know
Look
if
at
you can
that.
see it or not.
Yep.
Look, there's my laser pointer. I
see it on
can't
the big
do
screen now.
technology very well, but especially if you see something that is gray, dark, almost black, that's a sign you haven't gotten all the gray off. You need to do some more.
All right. This is currently January 15th.
16th.
16th. Oh, 16th.
Yeah.
Sorry. It is cold right now, right? Tomorrow, actually, here in Denver, we're going to be 15 degrees. So that's probably where I got the 15 from. Anyways, it's going to be cold. This is not staining weather. We do want to work, generally speaking, with the seasons. You'd like to work in the warm months that are not too cold or too hot. If you're down in Texas and it's the middle of summer, you know that it's over 100 degrees every day. That's not a good staining season, right? We want to be preferably about 90 degrees at the hottest, about 40 degrees at the coolest. So somewhere working in that zone is good weather. And of course, you want to look out for rain and snow and other things like that.
Really important that you stay out of direct sunlight. And we'll be talking about a little bit about how coatings cure. And when you do things on surfaces that are either too hot or too cold, they won't cure properly. And you'll get a lot of major problems that are very expensive and take a lot of time to fix. We see it not super regularly, but we get calls from people who've had washout because they applied stain. They thought on what was a nice day, it was 50 degrees outside during the day, but then at night it got down to 25, and then they got some snow and now they have washout. Well, things never had the chance to properly cure, and you end up with a big mess. And so it's very important that both air temperatures and the surface temperature of the wood be in that good 40 and rising, 90 and falling range.
Yep. There's a good example of some washout. If you just stained that wall and you were all happy, and then you left the job site, went home, and a thunderstorm came in right behind you. There's a roof structure you really can't see very well up to the upper left, but you can see that pattern of just erosion on the stain, just on the tops of the stain as it's come right down off that roof. Uh, we see that occasionally when people have unfortunately applied it just before a rainstorm.
But let me just tell you that the only way to fix this is to take that entire area down to bare wood, which
Hmm.
is going to be difficult when the stain is fresh. It's going to require probably a multi-step chemical process. Even media blasting probably won't get that off because it's still going to be pretty elastic. So do yourselves a favor and just don't do this.
Watch the weather.
Yeah.
What happens when it's February, I mean, January
16.
16th,
Yeah.
right? And it is 20, 15 degrees or so when you apply stain. Stuff like this happens. In this case, this was a clear acrylic product, Symphony, and a customer had been building a home. They got it all, the home was put together pretty well. They decided to stain the interiors before the windows and doors were in. And it was at the very end of the season, and things were getting really tight. Um, they threw in a propane torpedo heater in there, but didn't have enough gas in there. So they went ahead, they stained as far as they could. The winds whipped up, wind blows right through that house. And, even if you put sheeting over the windows and such, it doesn't keep in the heat very well. And you can still have problems like this where things turn out strange and crackly because you've frozen your product on the wall.
Mhm.
Darn.
So temperatures matter. And again, same issue here. The only fix is to go back to bare wood. You're not going to be able to sand off just that crackling and get a match. It's
Yeah.
always going to be a little bit hazy. And so that's really difficult, time consuming, laborious. Just don't do it. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. What what does choosing a stain really mean? What are your expectations? If you're a pro and you're doing this for someone, what are their expectations? Um, so much of the time, a homeowner focuses on color and
Mm.
what they think is ease of maintenance. And different types of technologies will deliver different levels of that. Color can mean, do you want a solid color? Do you want a semi-transparent? Do you want natural, something that we're not big fans of around here? It just doesn't last. What kind of maintenance are you willing to do?
Mm.
When they say, easy to do maintenance, really what they're saying is, I don't want to do maintenance for 5 to 10 years. And that's impossible on a log home.
Mm.
If you were looking for something that is not going to need to be maintained for several years, logs are probably not for you. And that's okay. We want more log homes out there. You could make sure you just put overhangs and wraparound porches on everything, and then you can go several years without having to do a whole lot of maintenance. Um,
Built it
but
right.
you need to always, always, always be aware of stains, coatings that contain silicones, waxes, or non-drying oils. No matter what look you want to get, no matter what kind of maintenance you want to have, those are big no's. And here's why. Uh, isn't that a lovely picture of failed chinking?
Mm. We don't have happy customers when we see that,
No.
right? No customer wants to have their house as it settles. The logs move a little bit else. It pulls on that chinking in between the logs and stresses it. And if the chinking doesn't have a really good, strong bond to the stain or the wood underneath, it's just going to peel up like that. And that is a classic adhesion failure, most likely because this was interior. They might have had a lacquer on there. It could have been silicone. It could have been waxes, non-drying oils. All kinds of problems can happen. Um, it's interesting because there are some log stains, well, stains that have log in the name that are non-drying oil stains
Right.
or waxes or silicones and things like that. So
On the
got to be careful.
exterior, something like this is going to lead to premature failure of your stain as well.
Hmm.
The minute you have opened up a seal and allowed moisture to get back to any amount of bare wood, or anywhere where the water can sit in there, which is going to do more easily in a a joint like this where the sealant has failed, you are now stressing the coating more and allowing more moisture in there, and that's going to lead to more premature failure of your stain. So while silicones, waxes, and non-drying oils can sometimes be good on decks, on shingles, even sometimes on handrails, for a log wall that is in at least in some places going to require chinking or caulking in some area, it's best to stay away from them. And what that says, that last bullet point, sand and do a water splash test on a restoration. If you're not sure what's been used on there before, that water splash test is going to tell you if there's something waxy on there, because that water is going to beat up after you have done prep. And it's going to require probably some like a degreaser kind of cleaner to try to get everything off of the surface.
At the minimum.
Yeah.
And pretty much think about it. Every single log home has doors and windows, and those all need to be sealed up against the moisture.
Yeah.
So water damage. So yeah.
So here's something else that most people don't necessarily think about when it comes to premature failure of coatings, or at least earlier failure. I don't necessarily want to call it premature because you get what you pick. So more concentrated colors equal better UV resistance, which means better longevity. It's really as simple as that. Clears are a terrible idea on exterior wood. They can be used on the interior, but even on the interior, due to normal oxidization, just oxygen getting to the wood and turning it yellow over time, using a clear by itself is not always what you want to do. You can get that picture frame effect when you go with just a clear on the interior. So it's usually a good idea to put either a light colored stain or a pre-stained base coat like our Color Fast on prior to a clear on the interior. On the exterior, if you get here in Colorado, we're in Denver where we are, we're at 5,200 feet above sea level. A clear is going to last you about 6 months. That's it. Before it starts to discolor and degrade the wood. Transparent stains, a lighter transparent stain that doesn't have any white pigment in it, you're going to have to do, especially on the south and west sides, you're going to have to do maintenance every probably 2 to 4 years at the most. A darker will last you a little bit longer. Semi-transparent, you're starting to add in some more pigment there. That's going to go even further. And of course, anything that's opaque or paint-like is going to last you the longest. But those are a bad idea, and we'll get to that in just a second.
That's just a good example of a clear that was put onto a home, and it probably isn't more than a year or so afterwards. And they're already going back to restain it. Kind of like that picture.
Yeah.
People
Yeah, it's a lot of work
might
to
reconsider choosing clear or that natural look.
if you consider that of the cost of a project, if you're having someone do it for you, you're not DIYing it. If you're having someone do the project for you, products make up about 10% of the cost. Labor is what makes up the rest of the cost of that. And if you use a clear and you get that damaged wood and you have to go back down to bare wood because you have UV damaged wood on there again, that's a lot of money to be paying to have your home taken back down to bare wood every few years because your stain didn't last. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So choose a color that you are comfortable with the maintenance intervals and that you're going to maintain.
Yep.
So, if opaque paints and stains last so long, why doesn't everybody just paint their log homes? Besides the whole obvious thing that you chose wood and you want to see wood, that's the obvious for anybody who has a log home, right? You'd think, but I see so many
We think.
painted log homes. Here's why. Oh, this is a lovely story, Jim. Go ahead.
Hmm. Well, paint hides everything underneath it. It's supposed to. It's opaque, right? You're not supposed to see what's happening underneath. The wood still cracks, though. And as the wood cracks, the paint is going to crack on top of it, and water will get down into inside those cracks and it will enter the wood, and it will begin to rot out the wood. But on the surface, all you see is a decent layer of eh, maybe a little bit cracked paint. Unfortunately, most homeowners look at that and they don't even realize the danger that they're actually running. The two pictures here, you can see that rot coming through. The dark one, you can see how they've probably just used a screwdriver and knocked out a little bit, and it's just punky underneath the paint layer. The paint layer is actually holding the wood together in that particular picture. The other one, the lighter colored one, was another home down in California where they actually came through, they painted it and went for years that way. New owners came in and decided to you know stain it so it actually looks like wood. And the contractor came out and he started tapping on the wood with either a hammer or the back of a screwdriver. And every time he heard a hollow thunk, 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 uh, he put a piece of tape down there. That entire corner was actually rotted out completely and was able to be demolished with simply a screwdriver. So it just goes to show how bad that rot can be, hiding underneath what just looks like a normal painted surface.
Right. I, obviously pay attention. We talked about this at the last webinar, but you notice in that lighter color with all the blue painter's tape on there, that was a kind of a barn style log home
Mm,
with no overhangs and the rain and snow falling directly on those logs.
yep.
That's just a terrible, terrible design. Highly unrecommend.
And no gutters either, as you can see.
Right. But just a little misnomer that I see on the online groups on Facebook all the time. People say that paint isn't breathable. That's not true.
Mm,
Paint is very breathable. A lot of the acrylic stains on the market are based on paint technology. It's very breathable. You can actually get quite a bit of water vapor to pass through
mm,
paint. It's not so much the paint is not breathable, it's the combination of the right quantities of water and the fact that things are hidden that you don't see any of that rot
mm.
when it happens. If that paint maintained a continuous film and there were never any cracks in it and the wood never moved and got any checks in it, then the paint would probably work just fine.
Yep.
But that's just not how wood works. We all know that.
Logs move a lot.
Well, yeah, logs move.
Yeah, they're gonna crack.
Yeah, it's going to
Well,
happen.
seeing that water damage though is a good visible clue that you need to do something about the cracks in the stain and seal them up again so that you prevent more water from getting in. So picture you see here is a good example of what we look for. This is actually uh, beyond what we'd like to see when you do maintenance. But it gives you a lot of the idea, right? You can see the flame stitch patterns happening on that wood. That wasn't the people doing the stain job being very clever and making it look beautiful and old. That is actually water damage. And if you don't seal up those little pinholes, those will progress and become worse and worse and worse over time.
Mhm.
So this is the kind of stuff that we want to look for on a log home, or really any stained exterior wood. And it's why you want to actually have a transparent coating. So you can actually see the damage happening and do something about it while it's easy to do something about it.
Mhm. It's that last bullet, don't wait for stains to look bad. You don't wait for your engine to start knocking before you get an oil change.
Mm.
Keep up with your maintenance ahead of time. You'll be doing yourselves a big favor that way. Here's a great, I love
Uh,
this picture, Jim.
Yep, I found this inside of a paper a couple years ago, and I loved how it just took us through a progression of years. This is the same piece of wood And each picture progressively takes it through one more year of weathering. And you can see at the very beginning over there, it looks like a completely beautiful piece of wood. A year later, if you look real close by that little arrow, you can see there's a tiny bit of discoloration, a little pinhole where water has gotten in there and started to cause just a little bit of water damage. By the second year, they haven't done anything about it. And those pinholes have now allowed more water into them. And they've begun to, the wood expands and contracts underneath that as it soaks in, whatever else. It actually widens the hole a little bit. And now we're allowing even more water in. So by the third and fourth year, those little pinholes have become progressively worse and worse. And so here's the key, right? You don't want to wait until the fourth year and then go and restain everything because you're going to have to take everything down to bare wood, and that costs a lot of money. But what happens if you notice something's happening and within these panels, if you look there between that year one and year two, you notice something was going on and you said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put a maintenance coat on right now and seal up all those little pinholes so that they don't progress any further. If you can do that, you can seal them up and you can get another year or two out of that before any more pinholes start up.
This is also why it's important for coatings that you put on your wood to be flexible and or elastic. We'll talk about
For
that
sure.
later.
We,
Something that can move with the wood to prevent any cracking in the first place and prevent those pinholes
yeah.
from even starting.
It's easy to put on another coat of stain as a maintenance coat. It's fairly cheap compared to the whole redo thing where you take it all down to bare wood. So we like to say keep it in the easy zone.
Right.
Maintain earlier than you think you have to, and you'll save yourself money and keep your home looking much better all the time.
Yep.
All right. I have gone on a fair number of visits to log structures where the stain is failing earlier than expected. And over the years of experience, I noticed a common trend. And that common trend was that in pretty much every one of these jobs that I went to, I found that the stain was not being applied into the cracks and checks of the wood. A lot of times people were simply staining, but they weren't back brushing and working it into the wood itself. So these remained open areas for water to penetrate in behind the stain, and it fails quickly. It's almost like you were starting at year 4 on the previous slide. So we wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. We're trying to really encourage all the contractors out there, et cetera, or the applicators. Make sure when you apply your stain that you really do get it down inside all the checks and cracks of the wood so that all of the bare wood is actually protected from water penetration.
Homeowners, when you're doing your set, we tell you do semi-annual maintenance checks. Do one in the spring to check for all the winter damage from snow and that kind of thing. Do everything for it. Do another one in the fall to look for any sun and rain damage over the summer and get ready for winter. Any open crack or check anywhere where there's bare wood, put some stain in there, or if it's wide enough, obviously you need to seal up with some sort of sealant, caulking of some kind, so that water can't get in and continue to fester and cause issues.
Yeah. You can see times like this when a contractor is not used to doing log structures, right? If they've been doing painting for a long time and somebody comes and asks them to do, to stain a log home, they approach it like a paint job. And they simply just don't have the knowledge about how important it is to get the stain inside all those checks and cracks. So be careful with who you choose to have work on the home. If you have somebody who's brand new, send them to ZF or insist that they come to ZF or something. Talk to us, do whatever you got to do. Because it does make a big difference. In this particular slide, you can see the difference between the bottom pieces that look perfect. Those were stained at the same time as the ones right above it. The difference was that those were brand new pieces of wood that were stained down on the ground, and they had no checks or cracks in them. They had no weathering on them, whatever else. So those were perfect. That's how we expect our stain to work. but just above that. It was only maybe 2 years after or so, it was looking terrible. Didn't start off that way. They stained it and it looked actually pretty good, but they didn't get the stain into the checks and cracks. Ouch.
Ouch is right. So let's talk about stain color choice. Um, this goes for homeowners and contractors. Always, always verify the desired color before staining large areas. Sashco provides samples. They're little, like 4-ounce samples that cover about a 2 square foot area. Prep an area, apply that sample. I usually tell people put on 3 heavy coats. That's the equivalent of 2 sprayed on heavy coats. So you can really see the color development because the porosity, the age, the species of wood, what kind of prep you're doing, all of that is going to affect the final color. And a color chart isn't going to be accurate. Our color charts, we do all of our staining on Douglas fir because we think it photographs the most clearly and has a little bit more grain definition to it. Doug fir has a natural reddish undertone to it. We color correct for that in our photography a little bit, but you can't, all that to say, you can't choose from a color chart. You can get an idea from a color chart of the tone that you want to go for. Then you get your samples and actually apply your samples. This customer, is up in New York State, was not happy with how dark her interior logs turned out, and they sent us this picture. They said, look, the color is really closer to this on the color chart, and this is what we picked. Well, this was red pine, and they didn't do any sampling, just started applying things and said it was too dark.
Yep.
So very important to do your sampling because species, like I said, species, age, porosity, previous coatings that were on the wood, all of that will affect your final color. And it's I don't want to say failure, but a kind of a type of stain failure when you've got it on a whole wall. And again, you can't go back without going to bare wood. So verify, verify, verify.
And even at the very beginning of the stain job, you think you've done everything right, you think you got the color you want. With that first little bit that goes on the wall, make sure that's right. Don't do the entire home, and then look at the color.
Yep.
Catch it early
And
when it's
here's
easy to fix.
a great example of a contractor who went in. He blasted just a portion to do the samples and then started doing the work on the rest of the house so that the homeowner could come and verify the color. You can do a bigger version of this, but make sure you do your prep. Here's why you need to do your prep. We had some people who said, oh, this doesn't look like the right color. It looks like pecan, which is our darkest dark brown in one of our stains.
Yeah.
Not like the lighter bronze sycamore that they chose. So they sent us the wood.
They wanted the light yellow color of the wood on the right, but they got this dark brown. And they said, well, you must have put pecan in the can.
Yeah.
Well,
this is what was really true.
When I sanded down the wood, you can see that on the upper left, I sanded down the bottom portion of it and found that they had simply put this light yellow clear stain over really dark degraded wood without doing any prep whatsoever. Our stains are good, but they're not magic. They can't magically make the stains that are in the wood already disappear. So, you know, proper prep matters.
Proper prep matters for your samples. And even if you look over here where they did do some prep, but if you look up at the top side of this log here, you can see some dark in there because they didn't get all of the old coating and some of the degraded wood off.
Yep.
And we got a call from them saying, why is it different in this area and not down here? And we said, well, you just need to get in there and sand more. Well,
Yep.
I don't have a tool to get in there. That's something to just keep in mind when you go through, and if you're doing media blasting, that will get that. But sometimes you're going to have to get out that scrawny little Dremel tool to get into the curves.
Or the scraper or the oscillating tools.
Something like that.
Yep. It takes more work to get inside all the little curves and get the gray wood off
Yep.
But that gray wood will stain almost black, kind of like, well, in the extreme cases, like the upper left picture up there, right?
If everything looks gray or black, that's a sign you have some more prep to do with your sample. So
Yep.
you guys are
Get it
aware.
down to bare wood to make it last the longest.
All right. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the stain types and their pros and cons, where they're more appropriate. We covered some of this in the last webinar, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. It's just a good reminder of the types that are out there, what they are really best for, what to look out for when if you're doing a restoration job. There are kind of telltale signs with some of these, what might be on your surface, so that you can go in eyes wide open and know what you're getting yourself into.
Yep.
So there's really three types: oil and water based. That's only two, and those aren't them anyways. Deep penetrating oil-based stains, shallow penetrating, and surface stains. Shallow penetrating oils, there's also hybrids in there. In Canada, they call them waterborne. They're kind of a water and oil emulsion. And then there's surface stains. Those are all water-based acrylics
Yep.
for the most part. All right, Jim, go ahead.
All right, so these deep penetrating stains are what they really are non-drying oils. Think about motor oil. You could leave that out in a dish and it would just never ever dry, never firm up. It's always oily, which is great for your motor. It's not great for your logs. And we'll get into that in a minute. Sometimes these things are mixed with an oil that will dry and form a hard film. So sometimes there's a blend, but the dominant characteristic is really that non-drying character that you really want to watch out for. These things will wind up soaking into the wood really, really well. And I like to say that they're creepy. You've all taken a can of like 3-in-1 household oil and left it on the shelf after you've opened it up. And then you come back to it a month or two later, and what's happened is that oil has creeped out of the container, flowed down around it, and made a little ring of oil around that container. And that's because that oil wants to creep. It wants to spread all over the place. And that's exactly what these non-drying oils are doing in your logs. They are spreading and spreading and spreading and creeping into every nook and cranny, and they go deep into the wood. They'd like to say that's fantastic for the wood, and it actually is pretty good for the wood, but it is horrible if you want any stain or coating or sealant to stick to that wood in the future.
Good luck caulking around your doors and windows if you have a product like this on there.
Yep.
Brands that are examples that are fairly well known out there. Q8, that's a pretty popular brand out there. TWPs, their 1500 series. They've got a few out there. Woodguard, Thompson's Water Seal. Everybody's seen that commercial where they put water on the deck and it beads up. Beading is bad. I won't go into that too much. Armstrong Clark is one of those blends.
Yep.
They have some drying oils in it along with the non-drying oil. Chevron shingle oil, anybody? That's a blast from the past, 1940s and 1950s, but it's still out there. Good for some initial water resistance, but once those oils get so deep into the wood, that surface is unprotected, you're still going to end up getting some rot. There will be some places for water to get in. And it's just going to look really old too.
Well, if you call up these companies, they'll tell you that you can still use those with sealants, but that you simply have to apply the sealant first. We have found that is not true. What happens is these oils will simply creep behind the sealant, and then because it's an oil and like dissolves like, if you remember that from your chemistry classes, those non-drying oils will creep in and they will begin to soften the sealant behind it, and it will reduce the adhesion of the sealant, even if you apply the sealant first. So these wind up penetrating into the wood, and it becomes, if people have done successive coats year after year, as is recommended by the manufacturers of those particular stains, you wind up having a log that is soaked with oil, and there's really no going back from that. No easy way back. If it's only a coat or two, you could maybe get back with some car wash detergent and really, really get out the oil as much as you possibly can. Cross your fingers and hope for the best. But if there's multiple layers of these oils in there over the years, um, it's kind of like going up and spilling a quart of used motor oil over your couch. It's never going to be the same. You're always going to have that oil creeping around inside there, and you're trying to get it out. So
Try to
it's a
avoid them
bummer.
if you can. If you can't, because the home already had something on there, let us know. We'll talk you through what it would take
Mm,
to remove as much of it as possible. And then we'll tell you need to go with another oil-based product, not another deep penetrating oil. You can usually switch to a drying oil,
mm,
and you'll just have to keep your eye on it. The risk of there being major problems is pretty low. We have kind of honed the process for switching from a non-drying oil to a drying oil. We've seen people switch from a non-drying oil to a water base, some with okay results, some with really bad peeling results.
yeah.
So we generally shy away from recommending that. These deep penetrating non-drying oils do have some really good strengths. You get no lap
Mm,
marks. There's never any peeling because they don't ever form any sort of a film.
yeah.
They're very easy to apply, very DIY friendly. Um, there's no need to back brush. So, when you don't have it in you to get your back into it with that back brush, these are going to be ideal products.
And that makes them great for shingles and decks and
Mhm.
fences and things like that, handrails sometimes. So, they do have a place in the industry. Um, I would argue that they don't have a place on a log home, unfortunately.
Yeah. They just because of the whole issue with sealants,
Yeah.
it's just a big no. Um, Plus very poor durability. We have some exposure panel reports
Hmm.
on our website that you can go check out. Those deep penetrating oils here in Colorado last, you know, 6 months, maybe a year before they start to turn gray.
Yep. All right. So watch out for any stain uh, that has beading on the label, especially. Because there's lots of stains. You don't have to choose Sashco. We'd love it if you did, but you don't have to. But if it shows beading on the label, be careful, right? Because that probably means that you're in a home improvement center like Home Depot or Lowe's or someplace, and you're looking at a deck stain. Uh, the paint industry for years has put these materials into deck stains in particular, so that it would bead up water, and that was seen as a benefit to customers. Goes back to the old Thompson's waterproofer commercials from years ago. But the beading actually doesn't do anything good for you. It actually just concentrates the water in one spot, and the water soaks into the wood. It's actually better if the water simply sheets off the surface.
Mhm. Like on your car, you
Yeah,
don't want that water beating up because it will cause those water spots, even if you have a good wax job. You want it to sheet.
yep.
Sheeting is much better in general. So look out for anything that has silicones or non-drying oils in it in any of the other categories that we're going to be, the other two categories we're going to be talking about.
Yep.
They aren't going to come right out and say it on their label. You'll have to ask. You can call us. We have a pretty good idea of most of the brands out
Mhm.
there that might contain those. Um, and of course, you'll see it if you try to apply sealant on it and it doesn't stick. I hate saying that. Excuse me.
Well, shallow penetrating stains, well, or what I like to call drying oil stains, come in a couple different types. You do have solvent-borne, but there are also waterborne versions of these that are basically oil and water emulsions. So think about taking oil and on your hands perhaps, and you put some soap on there, and you can make it dissolve and go into water, right? So we've done the same thing in the paint industry where we make these oil and water alkyds as well. So this is a traditional type of wood stain. You're going to be able to use a regular oil. It's like I said, sometimes solvent with it. Our transformation log and timber is a type of this one here. And it goes in and it will penetrate for a little ways. But before it goes all the way into the wood, it's going to start to cure and dry. And it'll cross-link with oxygen and form a solid film. So that works out to be a pretty good stain.
Mhm.
We talked about the solvent-based stuff and water-based emulsions.
They're generally compatible with most sealants.
Yeah.
So that's good. Call us first, though. It's we always say if you're going to be using log jam or conceal, or if you're using Permachinx products, or if you're using
Mhm.
something off of the hardware store shelves, that's a like a typical acrylic or something. Check first to make sure that they aren't including any silicones or waxes in their formula. So some common brands, PPG Prolux used to be called Sickens. Some of Penafins, I think they're Blue Label. Um, Mesmers is a common brand out there.
Mhm.
Sanson. All of
Yeah.
Sanson's are shallow penetrating. Most of theirs are the waterborne
Mm.
that up. They like being the waterborne, but is a shallow penetrating product. And of course, our transformation stain, both the log and timber and the siding and trim. Sherwin-Williams, Woodscapes, Deckscapes, those are the waterborne versions for the
Mhm.
most part. So those are all common brands that you will see out there. The one that we know has the non-drying oils is this Armstrong Clark. Great
Yeah.
on decks from all I've heard.
Yep.
Don't use it on your log home. We've had a couple of pretty major complaints when someone has used Armstrong Clark on their log home because the
Hmm.
sealants wouldn't stick.
Yep.
So,
All right. So these have pretty good penetration. Usually you can recoat those without any trouble at all. Like I said, they're compatible with most sealants. Um, and they actually look really good, especially the solvent-based ones. Those give you a look that is incomparable. It's almost like looking at a stained glass window. That really beautiful wood look is used in a solvent-based, oil-based coating, like an alkyd coating. Some people have the money to pay for that, and they pay to maintain it as well, in that really good condition. But they all kind of eventually crack and peel, and will allow water in. So they require a little bit more maintenance. The water-based versions definitely require more maintenance. You just simply can't get enough oil in to do the work, to make it last a long, long time. And so the water-based versions usually wear out a little faster.
I will say though, the water-based versions in general, depending on on their failure mechanism, like our siding and trim,
Mm,
great for decks because it's an eroding alkyd.
yep.
It's a power wash and recoat. So very easy to do maintenance on. Um, you don't have to do as much prep because the prep goes pretty fast.
Mm,
There are some water-based versions though that don't erode. Their failure mechanism is to almost come off in sheets. I've seen that with
and reels.
Sherwin-Williams
Yep.
Deckscapes. So if they are willing to tell you what the failure mechanism is, ask because some of those can be very easy to maintain.
That's really why we continue to make a water-based version, is for
Mhm.
decks in large part. It's also super easy to apply for a homeowner, but you just got to apply it much more often,
Yeah.
because they do wear out faster. So there's our weaknesses,
Oh,
lap marks and other stuff like that, but they do get brittle with age, and then crack and peel and erode.
yep. The
So
other thing with oil-based versions, VOC restrictions are
yeah,
making it harder and
yeah.
harder to formulate for those. Um, you just have to meet a level that there isn't a solvent. There are a lot of solvents that just don't meet that. And I love this. I have a typo. It's not restrictions, it's just restrictions. Um, I can nitpick at myself on the
Look
typo.
at that.
So there's no such thing as an oil that will stay permanently, a drying oil that will stay permanently flexible.
Hmm.
So logs are always moving. Yes, they will move less the older they get, but they still move every single day, every single year as they take on and give up moisture with
Hmm.
wind, with changes in barometric
Yep.
pressure. They're going to be moving, and your oil is eventually going to get tired and want to crack and peel. And this is what I always tell people who ask me, when you say they aren't going to last as long? If all things are equal, you've done proper prep, you've applied it properly, you've kept up on the maintenance regularly, you can get 15, maybe 17 years out of a good quality oil-based, drying oil-based stain. Out of an acrylic, you can get 25 years if you keep up with everything on a routine basis. So, 10 years difference without having to go back to bare wood for a lot of people is a big deal. But I will also say these shallow penetrating drying oils are the most beautiful stains you can get. The way that they highlight the grain
Yep.
is just a deep penetrating oil can't do it, and those surface stains can't do it. It is absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
And there's something to say when you got a wood home for beauty. So
For sure. And I'll say also that, because the wood moves so much and the trouble is cracking, for our solvent-based stain, the transformation log and timber, I make it as soft as possible so that it can actually respond and move with the wood for as long as possible. That does mean that it's going to be different from what other people might expect for a solvent-based alkyd stain. Almost all of those stains on the market are made to be hard finishes that you can go up to almost like a piece of glass or a piece of plastic. Ours are almost rubbery when they're cured up properly.
Makes it a little bit more finicky at application. We get some complaints about that. But it makes for better durability. And so that's the trade-off that we've decided to make.
Makes it last longer.
All right. I know we're getting low on time here. Bear with us. We've got 5 more slides to go to talk about surface stains, and then we'll open it up for questions. So hang in there with us.
All right. Surface stains. These are going to be the water-based acrylics for the most part. They might be, you could also include urethanes or epoxies, things like that in here. But for the most part, water-based acrylic stains and paints would fall into this surface stain layer or category. And these actually don't really penetrate much more than maybe 1 cell deep at the very most. Mostly, they just sit right at the surface. So those are going to be very, your success with them is going to be very dependent on how well you do the prep. More on these than on any other stain type because they do just stick to the surface. So if your surface is not good, if you got stuff that flakes off really easy, it's not going to be able to penetrate through to the sound wood underneath. But these are great products that last a long time when they're properly applied. So super durable against ultraviolet light, the sunlight, and water. You can formulate these everywhere from really hard and brittle all the way to soft and gummy. So if you look at Sashco's, we are on the very soft side, so it moves to the wood. But not all stains are like that. These are going to be water-based. It's going to be easy to clean up. Let's see. We talked about the wood prep already.
Yep.
Eventually, these will crack and peel, but it takes more time.
Takes more time. And yeah, it really does depend on the quality with the cracking and peeling too. And we can see some of them will get super hard, almost like something you'd want to put on furniture. You do not want to use furniture finish on your log home. Those are very hard. They're designed to be very hard because you're setting things heavy on top of furniture and that kind of thing. You don't want it to be so sticky. You're not getting the same movement out of a piece of furniture as you are your home. So just keep that in mind.
Right. Acrylics, like I said, soft to flexible, all the way up to really hard. These are going to be vapor permeable. So water moisture that does get into the wood in limited quantities can escape out very easily. They can last for a long time on your logs. And they can even be used on your fiber cement siding Maybe if you have your gable ends with some fiber cement shingle or something like that up there, or even just fiber cement up there. Fiber
Hmm.
cement siding is used a lot of times. This can be used over that as well. If you,
Epoxies are a bad idea. Just so you, we have some people who've asked, well, if an epoxy does so well on my kitchen table that I just finished, won't it do a great job on my logs? And the answer is no.
yeah, they generally don't last very well in the sunlight.
Yeah.
Urethanes, I will caution against using a pure urethane coating on any logs, whether it's inside or outside, because they really can't breathe. You won't find very many pure urethanes. A lot of them only have a tiny bit of urethane with some acrylic, and those could be okay.
Hmm.
But
Common brands, R Capture and Cascade system, Permachink's Lifeline, Olympic Premium, UV Guard. Cabot's has some acrylic out
mhm,
there. Benjamin Moore. They just changed the name to Woodlux. It used to be their, oh, I can't remember what the name of it now. But some of a lot of the paint guys will have a water-based. Usually they're solid. They very rarely sell a water-based semi-transparent.
mm,
They'll sell a lot of water-based solid stains for decks and that kind of thing. Broda is a very common brand up in Canada. They have a water-based acrylic.
yep.
Um, there are quite a few of them out there, but I will just tell you that in general, the paint companies don't do a great job with stain. Stain ain't paint. And they like to just apply their same paint technology to stain. It doesn't always work out very well for them.
Yeah, especially
So,
not on logs. Paint
right,
companies are not used to looking at logs and the large timbers and that kind of movement. Paint companies look at the 1x6 fascia board and your T111 siding,
right.
stuff like that. They
Wood,
look at your trim boards, not logs, and logs move so much more that they require a much more flexible coating if they're going to last.
right. So I'm actually going to skip us past these next slides and take us to the end. Little QR code there. Scan that. Request your free sample pack from us. Like I said, one of our log home guides, Todd, Joanne, Jordan, will follow up with you. But I want to open it up. You can take yourselves off mute or let me check and see if I have the access to the chat box up here. Hang on a second if I can get to the other screen. I might not be able to. Oh, come on.
Nobody said anything in the chat.
Okay, nothing in the chat box. Anybody have any questions? You want to take yourselves off mute and feel free to ask. Usually it's a pretty good sign if there are no questions because that means we covered everything you ever wanted to know.
That's not possible. Come on, you can play Stump
Hi.
the Chemist.
Oh, hi, Greg and
Hi.
Wendy. I can read your name on the screen.
Um, so we're new to the log cabin and we own a business. We've actually met with Bob, with Grizzly Bob
Good.
before, and we're coming to the zero failures class in February.
Yay!
So we're super excited. Um, is there any less failures with siding versus the actual logs?
There definitely is less failure with siding.
Okay.
So with siding, you could build a 2x6 frame. You could insulate it, everything else, right? Do all kinds of stuff like that. So you have very few penetrations to the outside that way. But on the outside of those 2x6s, you can put down house wrap and other things, and then you can put up log siding on the outside. Now that log siding may only be 2 inches thick. And so since it's only 2 inches thick, it doesn't move nearly as much as that
Okay.
full log structure would. And so you don't get the checking and the cracking that comes with it. So
Okay.
siding can actually work quite a bit better for longevity of stains and coatings than full logs.
The other thing to
Okay,
keep in
and
mind is the curvature of log siding, unless it's true half logs. But if it's like, like the quarter round, you know, tongue and groove, 8 inch with a little bit of a hand peel face on it, the curvature is not as extreme as it is on a full round log. And so therefore the way the sun hits it is not as extreme.
Mm.
And so it doesn't stress the coatings as much. The siding, you don't get the stress as much as you do on a full round log, where you have that very extreme curvature of the wood, and the sun reflecting on it and hitting it regularly.
Yep.
okay, and then my other question was, how many layers of stain can be on before you have to take it down to bare wood?
If it is, well, it's probably going to depend on the condition of the stain. If you
Okay.
have perhaps put on an oil-based stain ages ago, maybe it was Sickens from, 15 years ago or something.
Mhm.
It's a fairly hard stain. It's going to be cracked and trying to peel off a little bit. But because it's so hard, especially if you go back over that with a more elastic stain on top of it, it tends to literally peel it right off of the wood. So if you see peeling, the peeling is going to indicate, no matter how many coats you have, that you need to take it back down to bare wood. If it's
Okay.
peeling off in like sheets, right? A couple spot peeling, not a problem. So that's the one extreme. But if you look at if you used only our transformation log and timber, which is fairly soft, and you kept up with your maintenance and you did it year after year, you might get 4 or 5 coats on before you wanted to take it off.
Not each year, but year after year, meaning every, 3 or 4 years when you need to do maintenance.
Yes, you
Yeah.
Over that
Yeah.
time, you're going to build up,
several
5 or 6 layers, but over 15 years.
right.
Okay.
But you can get too much stain on there. We're actually dealing with a problem here in Colorado now. We had a homeowner who just thought it was better to apply a coat of Cascade and then every other year put on a new coat of stain. And he's probably got, he started back in like 2000. He probably has 15 to 20 layers of stain and clear coat on there.
Yep.
And he's got some rot now because some of those cracks and checks opened up. He didn't seal those, and it's just so thick now. It's almost like having 3 or 4 paints of coat on there, or coats of paint. Can I speak
Probably
clearly?
5 or 6 or 10.
So
I knew what you meant. I knew what you
yeah,
meant.
you can get too much on there. There is a point at which you can do almost too much maintenance. So
Okay.
you want to be careful about that.
Yeah. But there
Okay.
is no
Thank you.
problem. Like if we had our capture cascade system and it's a system that I love to encourage people to play with layering on, because you can put a light color stain on first for the first coat. The second coat, you might put a little darker color on that really kind of accents the grain and makes it look really beautiful. Well, sometimes people want to put a third coat on. That's great. No problem. You put a coat of Cascade over that, right? Now we're up to 4 coats, but they're all very thin coats as well. And so
Okay.
how thick the ultimate layers get
Mhm.
does matter. So the number of coats, it's one of those things that it's going to vary a little bit. There's no hard, fast rule for how many coats.
But more is not always better. That's
Not
Okay.
always.
more is not always better.
That's a long answer to say it depends.
Yeah.
But
No, but thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Absolutely. Any other questions out there? No? Hey, Bob.
How are we doing tonight?
Pretty good.
He was
You guys
hidden. I
did a
didn't
great
know.
job.
Late night for Grizzly Bob there in Michigan,
Yeah.
So
Nice cold night keeps me up. I got to keep putting wood in the fire. We got some cold weather here.
we're working our way there this weekend. We're supposed to be at 11 below, just in time for zero failures in January. Hooray! First class next week, and we're bringing in the polar vortex. That's
Wait a
what we
minute.
like to do
We have
around here.
space heaters.
That's
Take
right.
away too much.
Who ordered that weather?
Zero failures always orders it. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, You guys had that last slide. Let me put it up here one more time. Let me share my screen so we can get it in the recording. Hang on a second. Where did I go now with I gotta share my screen again. Where's my controls? Come on. There they are. Nope, that's not it. Apparently I am technology challenged right now. Reach out to Barb. She'll get you in touch with us. 'Cause I can't seem to figure out my controls now for the presentation.
webinar.
Yeah, I'm lost now. My controller is gone, so whatever. Sorry.
It's late.
Modern
It's late.
technology is not always great. So
And there will be a recording. I'll send the recording out to everyone so you can review it also. And
perfect.
it'll also be on the Sashco's member directory. There will be a link there too.
Perfect. Thank
All
you
right.
all for coming. We're gonna call it a night. Have a great night all. Stay warm.
Yep. See you, everybody.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.